You'll have to forgive me. I've never told a story in public before, performed in public before at all.
So good.
Okay, so I got this phone call one day. It was my brother-in-law, and he said, I would like you to be the godmother to my daughter. And so, which this question was confusing for many, many, many reasons, but I'll just hit the highlights. So I knew like right away all these questions were swarming around in my head, and I knew I needed to handle this delicately because I didn't want to sound like the answer was no or anything like that. But I was kind of like, well, okay, let me remind you that I'm Jewish. He said, yeah, I know you're Jewish. And I said, well, does the Catholic Church allow Jewish people to be godparents to Catholic children? And he said, I don't know, don't worry, it's fine. You know, kind of dismissive. He said he would, you know, but then he promised that he would talk to the priest, and, you know, I felt there was a couple of other things that I didn't think the Catholic Church would look too kindly upon that I just kind of felt that it was important to mention, and he was kind of not worried about it. So I said, okay, I'd love to, you know, that would be an honor, and thank you for asking me, and if the church is fine with it, then sure. So didn't hear anything more about it for a couple of months, and then he called and said, okay, the baptism date is all set. It's this date, and you need to be there, and you know we're going to do this. So I said, all right, great. So the date comes. It's the night before. Ian and I are going up there. We're going to be the godparents, and they live in Cortland, New York, which is in upstate New York. It's in the Finger Lakes region, so it's near Ithaca. So when you think about that area of the country, that part of New York, a lot of people think summer vacation, the lake, and they have all these beautiful mountain gorges up there, and Cornell University, this Ivy League college, and they have a vibrant downtown there, and the Moosewood restaurant, and all these wonderful things, and it's very beautiful. And Cortland, New York, which is a couple towns away from Ithaca, is nothing like that. It's very rural and depressed, and kind of like every fifth house is just dilapidated and falling off its foundation. And you drive around and kind of wonder, like, where does anybody work that lives here? There's just nothing here. So it's, you know, the place where they live is kind of, it's just very, well, there's like train tracks running through their backyard, and it's just, it's a little bit, you know, bleak there. But, you know, and they're struggling, but we're trying to be supportive, and they want us to be the godparents, so we're going up there. So really, Ian couldn't get off work, so 9 o'clock at night I pick him up from work. We drive up there. We get there at 4 in the morning. I think we got lost on the way, so it took us longer than normal. And so we got like 2 hours of sleep or something. So we get up and we go to this church, and despite what I was just saying about how kind of bleak the scenery can sometimes be there, this church was really, really beautiful. It was very big and cavernous, and I felt strangely comforted by that, even though I think it might only be like the 5th time I've ever been in a church in my life. So we get there, and they have the Mass, and the whole time I'm kind of like thinking at some point that somebody's going to explain something to me. There was never any explanations. Like, I just figured somebody would tell me how the ceremony was going to go, or what it entails, or something. So as this Mass is going on, and there's been no explanation, and then they start to announce that this baptism is about to start, I'm starting to panic. Like, I have no idea what is about to happen. So anyway, the congregation leaves, and the baptism is just limited to the family, which I was happy about. And the priest announces he's very excited because this is his first baptism ever. And he's just graduated from the seminary, and he has a very thick accent. He's from, I think he was from Bulgaria or somewhere around that area of Europe. So he says, okay, so the godparents, you know, come to the front. So Ian and I stand up, and at which time my mother-in-law, Ian's mother, also stood up and started saying, "She's Jewish! She's Jewish!" I I just froze, and Ian just froze, and I was just thinking, you know, kind of, yeah, that's not a secret or anything, and it's not been a secret for the last 3 months that we were gonna be the godparents, so it's just very confusing, and I was kind of frozen, and so my brother-in-law kind of stood up and told her that it wasn't the time to discuss it, and just sit down, and she sat down, and he sat down, and then Ian just, I was still frozen, Ian grabbed my hand and just pulled me up to the front, and we sat there, and then, so still I had no idea what this baptism ceremony was going to entail, which ended up being a series of questions, which presumably you're expected to answer yes to.
Do you reject Satan as one of them?
Yes, so that was the only question that I answered yes to, was do you reject Satan? I felt very comfortable answering yes to that. And then the rest of the questions, I don't really remember what they were. I just remember one of them was, do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? And so I'm sitting here thinking, like, I'm not going to say yes to these questions, and, you know, if anything is, like, you know, if anything, if this needs to be stopped for any reason, I think that that's the priest's obligation or responsibility to recognize that there's an issue, and I'm just gonna, like, he's leading this show, so I'm gonna let him lead, and, you know, because all these thoughts are going through my head, like, should I say no to the question? Should I stand up and say, I'm Jewish, I'm Jewish? No, it's just so confusing. So he asked this question, do you accept Jesus Christ? And he looked straight at me, and I looked straight at him, and I just blank-faced, I just didn't say yes, and I didn't say no, and I thought, all right, well, he just kept on going. So then he said, okay, it's time to go up onto the altar for the actual, you know, water or whatever. And I really panicked. I was like, oh my God, I hadn't thought about that. We're going to have to go up there, and God knows what's going to happen up there. But anyway, so people were crossing themselves and saying the Lord's Prayer, and I was just kind of standing there in a daze, like, I just got protested and I have no idea what's going on, and I don't know if this is really legitimate. But I just kind of stood there, and I wasn't going to pretend. And then, you know, they did their prayers and stuff, and it was over, and then it was over, and everybody was really, really happy. And like jumping for joy and happy, and I just kind of went with it. And then we went to a restaurant and had a very awkward meal, and nobody talked about what had happened. And we got in the car and drove home. That's the story of how I was protested.